Hey guys, this is Hazard 502, and today we are going to do a review of the Tops Brakimo fixed blade knife. So what you get in the package is you get this taco style kydex sheath with a spring clip and a few lashing points along those eyelets. The Tops Brakimo itself is a blade made out of 1095 high carbon steel with a micarta bolt-on handle. It is a full tank construction, and you can see that we got some nice red liners in there. Blade stock is 5 millimeters. The overall length of this knife is 10 inches, blade being 5, handle being 5. You can see on the handle we got a bow drill divot on the one side, actually both sides, pardon me, and a generous lanyard hole. And we have a cutting edge that looks like a Scandi, but it actually has a micro bevel at the very cutting edge. I don't know if we're going to be able to catch it or not, but it is there. So there is a micro bevel right there, and kind of transitions into a Scandi on this knife. So what we're going to talk about first is the sheath itself. So there's a lot of good and one thing that I'm not a particular fan of. The good though, it has very solid construction, and it is a kydex click fit, and I've belt carried this in a number of orientations on many a hike around the camp and on bike rides, and this has not gone anywhere whatsoever. The retention in this sheath is excellent, not any rattle whatsoever, very firm and positive retention, pardon me for the bump there. So that's great. This is one fantastic sheath, and they did a really good job. There's a high attention to detail in the sheath, even though it looks simple. So we got a spring clip there as the main version of carry. Maybe you could attach a tag lock there or lash it different ways if you'd like. Let me just point out while I remember. Drain hole on the bottom. This spring clip has a lot of retention, and it does an excellent job of staying on your belt or whatever you choose to thread through there. It does have an extra catch, you can see there, so anything that you hook in there, it's going to stay in place. There is a rubber O-ring in there so that you are able to change the orientation of your carry, and I have spun this every which way and carried it in multiple different ways on my belt and on my pack, and spun it and spun it and spun it, and once you have it in position, it doesn't go anywhere. So given it as an O-ring, I wasn't sure if there was going to be a lot of life in that, but so far it has done its job very well and has gone nowhere, and is an excellent overall package for carry. So the one thing that I don't like about the sheath though is that you can see that this is a high ride setup. So when you have this on your belt, you do have all this extra handle digging into your hip, which I don't like. I like my sheaths to carry below the belt line, and I just find this an irritation. So that's my personal preference. I did find myself rotating the clip to kind of carry this in a more horizontal draw fashion, which works really well. Another really great benefit to this particular style of sheath, despite it being a high ride, is that when you go ahead and sit down at your picnic table, or get in your truck, or wherever you're going to sit down in your camping chair, you can rotate it to kind of contour to the surface that you're sitting on, without having to take this off your belt or draw the knife out. So overall, an excellent sheath, just not a fan of the high ride. Overall, very high quality though. Alright, so Tops Brakimo is Joe Flowers' design for Tops, and I find it to be a really attractive knife, and it's a design that really spoke to me. I really like the 8 3/4, I'd say, to 10-inch knife class for a good belt carry, a good camp knife, and this falls into that range very nicely. Now there is one thing that I'm not a big fan of, and which this knife isn't going to stay in the collection, unfortunately. I'll get to that. It's not a deal breaker likely for the majority of you, but for me it's not quite what I'm looking for. However, this is probably one of the most finely crafted fixed blades I've ever owned. The fit and finish on this is fantastic. You are most certainly getting what you pay for when you put down the money to receive this knife. One thing that I noticed that I failed to mention is that there are forward finger notches here for a pinch grip. So this is a very strong, robust, and finely constructed knife. The comfort with this micarta handle, even though it's blocky and what appears to be very thin, and I've mentioned this before in some of my other reviews, is that even though it might have a thin handle, as long as the handle itself is tall, then it provides the type of hand-filling traction that I find comfortable and very secure, and I find that to be the case with this one. Couple other dimensions forgot to mention is that the handle height is 1¼ inch, and the blade height at its tallest point is 1½. So again, fantastic dimensions. Love the proportions of this a lot, and it really suits the role that I find a knife in this size class mostly. And the handle itself, even though it looks squared off, all the edges are very nicely chamfered wherever your hand contacts it. I haven't found any hot spots with a lot of use with this knife. Carving, whittling, chopping, some food prep, and having it in the hand for a long time doing a lot of work, and the handle is awesome. I really like it. I think they did an excellent job with this. So to the blade, this is kind of where I'm not exactly happy or satisfied with this knife. Is that yes, it is strong, yes, it is robust. And another positive that I should mention is the blade tip is amazing. The final grind on this knife from the spine all the way to the cutting edge is so well done. Like, tops really nail the production on this thing. This is actually one of the best blade tips that I've come across for being strong but also being acute. And I think this is probably one of the blade tips that, like I've said, that I've ever seen, and it is amazing. Great piercing capability, but also very strong. So one thing's with this blade that I do kind of struggle with is that because it is a 5mm thick blade in an overall 10-inch package with a 5-inch blade, the final grind to the cutting edge is quite wide. So what I mean is I expect a knife in this size range to be good at the finer cutting tasks, and as a bonus be adequate for some heavier duty use. In this case, the Brakimo to me is more of a heavy duty survival knife in a compact package versus being a finer precision belt knife that might be able to carry some heavyweight tasks. So this is definitely, in my opinion, better at the heavyweight stuff and not so good at the lightweight stuff. So the edge itself, the very final cutting edge is precise, but I'm not sure if we're going to be able to see it here, and I will try. It widens out quite abruptly. So instead of being a fine cutting edge like this, or a fine grind for good cutting and slicing capability, after the initial cutting edge here, I find that the grind on the blade widens out like a wedge. So I find that the cutting tasks on this, it's not a very good slicing knife. I find you have to have a quite upright, steep angle for the initial edge to cut, because if you angle it over too much to slice like you would expect, it actually catches this edge and kind of skims along. So you have to hold the knife very vertical for it to bite in for finer cutting tasks, because of how much that cutting edge widens out. So what does that mean for being a heavier duty knife? Well, this thing will most definitely plow through material like a freight train. And because of how tough and wide and thick the steel is, carried very far down, this thing will absolutely blow through material with authority, which I found this to do great, like chopping tasks and heavy woodworking tasks. It is an absolute beast. But again, because of how wide it gets at the final cutting edge, the finer tasks, which I would more so expect this knife to perform at, isn't so great for me. Do I like this knife? I like it a lot. I think it looks great. It is very well built. It is an excellent looking knife. There's a lot of high points, but just because of the final cutting edge and the wideness of the grind here and how thick it is all the way down, I struggle to see it fit in the role that I would like to see it. I'm not particularly looking for a survival knife in the size range, more like a camp, finer cutting task knife, belt knife type of work that I would like this to do. Overall though, it is a very well done knife. I like it a lot. Few things that I would change, given that this is a little bit too high for my taste, and I would like to see this final cutting edge scanty portion ground down a little bit thinner to make it more of a better slicer. Overall though, can't argue with it too much. It's a really great knife and I've enjoyed using it and having it in my collection. That's all for this round, guys. Thank you for joining me, and we'll catch you in the next one.